have with me Kurt Scherer, one of the managing partners of C5 Capital. And I would love to know, there was a lot of talk today about space diplomacy and this role that the private sector now has in space, and that they're investing it, and that their presence is good for space and exploration and, well, eventually improving humanity. So C5 Capital, one of your big pillars is space and Axiom Space. So why did you decide to invest in that?
It's a great question. Advantages that space brings, from telecommunications to GPS to many people know about imagery that comes from space. That has all occurred over the last, let's say, 50 years. And what's exciting is we are just at the beginning of what the space revolution will be. That's kind of one point. A second point is, as you mentioned, there's a lot of private sector companies that are interested in space. And the reason that is because much of the technology development, the innovation, the engagement in the edge of what's happening from a communication standpoint or from an imagery standpoint is all occurring in the commercial sector. It didn't used to be that way with space. And so when you take those two things together, where space is continuing to be important to help humanity, and you have a much greater engagement with the private sector because that's where the innovation is, it seemed to us to be a very natural place to put our investors' capital.
So tell us more about Axiom's Space, because that's one of your companies, and what is it trying to do? We know about the space station.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Axiom is one of the leading space companies out there. As you may know, we've had an International Space Station in orbit since the beginning of the century. And when you look at the development and the engagement, that's been a 30-year effort. It's now time to retire the International Space Station. Now, that was very much a government-to-government platform. What Axiom has done is taken that same model and brought the best of the private sector to bear. So this will be the first commercial space station in existence.
When private companies get involved in space, it's obviously because it makes business sense. But the topic today was diplomacy. So where does the private sector come into diplomacy, space diplomacy?
It's a great question. From a diplomacy standpoint, diplomacy is always the most important thing in terms of engaging with other nations. Space is going to have the same things that we have terrestrially. So there will be competition, there will be cooperation, and understanding how to get the most out of the solutions and the services that are being offered, and to make sure, in some cases, where national interests are important, that those are protected and discussed in the right way. And so space diplomacy, and this is our credit to the Meridian Group for hosting this event, it's a really, really important element to consider as the market for space and as the engagement in space grows.
Do you think private companies could play a role in those channels that are needed?
We've seen an evolution in the public-private engagement, particularly within the United States and our allies. I think understanding that intersection and understanding how both companies can work with allied governments and how companies can work with other companies these are all aspects of diplomacy. I think we know from a Western standpoint that bottom-up, decentralized, free enterprise approach to innovation is the right way to go. It's hard. You've got to coordinate. You've got to bring in multiple stakeholders. But as we've proven over and over again from the U.S. and our allies' standpoint, that type of innovation will always be superior.
There have been a lot of discussions on regulations and forcing nations and private companies to adhere to certain rules. If you look at something like space debris, getting rid of space debris. So where do you see the role of the private sector in these rules?
Regulations are a very, very important thing. And as we've heard today, the ability to have a healthy tension between moving too quickly and not moving quickly enough is part of what a healthy regulatory body can provide. Our goal should be from either the government side or the private sector side is to engage in those discussions, to look for ways to recognize the limits sometimes of technology, but not to stifle innovation's advance, and to make sure that the regulation is supporting all stakeholders, but not slowing things down to where we can't see the importance of the progress being made.
Well, can we look at some of those timelines for the Axiom station? So what are the projected timelines for it?
So Axiom will be the first commercial station in space. What's one of the advantages that Axiom has is they have an agreement with NASA. And so we talked about the ISS before. As the ISS starts to reach its end of life, Axiom will be able to use parts of that existing space station to help support the construction of the modules, the Axiom modules. And so that gives them an advantage because you can use the power systems and the water and the other systems on the ISS to help support the construction in space. I mean, you can just imagine what it's like trying to create these modules in orbit in the most inhospitable environment that humans know, moving at 18,000 miles an hour above the Earth and building a space station. So I'm so impressed with the Axiom team, and the fact that they're led by Mike Suffredini, who was the ISS program manager for 20 years, certainly helps them and make sure they're doing that the right way.
Well, if we look at space stations, Voyager Space and Blue Origin, they are collaborating with NASA to develop their own space stations. So what sets the Axiom model apart from those?
Well, one is they're first. So we know the Voyager team, we know the Blue Origin teams. They're doing great work. We support their development too. Having more space stations is going to be great for everyone, and a rising tide will lift all boats. And it is great that NASA is working with all of them. The advantage for Axiom is that port. So they have unique access and exclusive access to the port on the ISS. And I think that, combined with their head start a little bit, together with the experience of Mike and his team, will give them kind of a head start.
Are you worried about monopoly in space?
No, I don't think so. I think, again, the competition will be helpful not only to ensure that the sharpest business plans come forward and that the right products are built, but there's just too much opportunity. The market is expected to grow 4 or 5 times its current size in the next 8 to 10 years. And whether it's supporting services on Earth through better communications so that all of our magic rectangles in our pockets work better, to imagery, looking at agricultural and farming changes, then there's a whole range of on-orbit services. So being able to use space stations to launch additional missions to repair satellites. I think the more space stations we can have, the better.
Can we look at one of your other verticals, which is nuclear energy? Is there synergy between nuclear energy and the space interest?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most people wouldn't see an intersection right away. But what's exciting about the intersection of space and nuclear, very practically, there are several solutions that are being developed. So one is for long-range rockets and long-range satellites. There's a technology called nuclear thermal propulsion. And so there will continue to be a need to look at longer duration propulsion for spacecraft that are going to go years and years and years. And as we try to get faster and faster, that's going to be an important technology. A really exciting second area is around using nuclear energy for power, which is certainly what we do on Earth. One of the challenges of having any kind of electronics on the moon is what's called surviving the night. And it has to do with the fact that the temperature difference between the light side of the moon and the dark side of the moon is, I think, around negative 200 degrees plus. And so that temperature becomes too cold for most electronics to survive. So if we want to have a base or a permanent presence for electronics there, what if we had a nuclear reactor there that could provide power that could then survive the night? That then opens the door for all sorts of new advances and new things that you could create and build on the lunar surface.
So what kind of progress are you making with these small modular nuclear units? So when can we see one?
Yes. Well, you can see a mock-up of one in Rockville, Maryland. We're also at a great company called X Energy. So we're also an investor in X Energy. And we've been building SMRs in the United States for 50 years. They're on all of our U.S. Navy submarines and our U.S. Navy carriers. So this is not, the idea of a small reactor is not new. Technologies like the one that X Energy is using is not new. It's been proven in South Africa and Germany beforehand. What is new is the vision to take this and put it in a reactor that can serve our cities, our people, can replace coal plants. And so the biggest change in the past several years has been the fact that many people now understand that nuclear energy equals clean energy. And so we now have, if you look at the amount of energy that's going to be needed by humans and the amount that could be produced, even if you assumed 100% on all of the renewable forecasts, the gap continues to widen. And then the second thing, of course, is everybody, rightfully so, is thinking about how to reduce carbon for climate change. The only solution that meets both of those problems is nuclear energy. And so X Energy has developed a great small modular reactor to do that. To your question, the first one will be in the ground in Texas sometime around the end of the decade. And what the other great news about that is that they've partnered with Dow Chemical. So Dow Chemical is the largest chemical company in the United States, the second largest in the world. And you couldn't ask for a better partner for X Energy because they wrote the book on mega projects. So now you have a rock star team and set of leaders with X Energy. They have a proven technology. They are supported by the DOE in a program called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. And they have a partner with a commercial company that knows how to drive big projects. So we feel very excited about the progress they're making and look forward to that first one. And I think once we do that, we're all going to be enjoying the benefits of nuclear energy as we move through the next decade.
Kurt Scherer from C5 Capital, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.